Welcome back, everyone. You are not live, but we have returned for another episode of the Rap Thought Podcast with your hosts, Matthew and Brandon.
Yay. I'll have to add in some applause and shit.
So, hello, everyone.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you to everyone tuning in. Thank you to all of our first-time listeners, our last-time listeners. Thank you for everyone that subscribes on Apple and follows us on Spotify. We see you. We appreciate you.
All day. Day.
And this week, we got a pretty special episode for me. I don't know about Brandon. I don't know how he feels about it, but...
Oh, you'll get how I feel about it.
We are doing the Beastie Boys' second album, Paul's Boutique, from 1989.
Are you Adidas or Fila?
Right now, I'm definitely Adidas.
Yeah, you soccer.
I don't think I've ever been Fila. I don't think I've ever bought anything Fila.
I think I had a pair of shoes back in the day, some Filas. But my older brother is very much Adidas. But I have to be different for my family members, so I rock Chucks.
Yeah.
But
I definitely rocked Nike when I was younger.
Nike's cool. I remember this first pair my mom got me. They were way too big for me. But it was like, hey, I got you a pair of Nikes. And I was like, oh, my God.
Nice.
And then I don't think I kept them long enough to ever fit into them.
Yeah.
So I think we moved. But...
Yeah.
So that's them. But it's going to be an interesting pod. To be honest with you, I'm not even going to say I'm not the biggest Beastie Boy fan. I never really was. I never really got into them.
Did you ever listen to a full project before?
No, not a
From
full
any of them?
project. I mean, I've heard Intergalactic. I've heard Brass Monkey. I've heard the big
So you've
hits
heard
and
like
everything.
some of their singles
Yeah.
that they put out.
But never a full-on album. And they never got my attention enough to do that. And they sound so similar. For me, they sound so similar to Run DMC.
Yeah.
That if I don't listen to them either. But if I'm going to pick one, I'd probably go Run DMC. Just
Gotcha.
their sound.
Yeah, that's fair. I have a long history with the Beastie Boys, as any white hip-hop fan would, I guess. No, growing up, probably when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, my brother, who's 4 years older than me, would, whenever we were in the car with my mom, we'd always listen to K-Rock, 106.7, which in LA is... K-Rock is a rock station, but they also played Beastie Boys, because I guess they have some rock influences, especially on their first album. And I remember the first hip-hop song I ever memorized was Paul Revere from License to Ill. And it's a crazy song. It's a story, and it's like 6 minutes long or something like that. It's really long. But I remember memorizing that and falling in love with it. And the first CD I ever got was the Beastie Boys' License to Ill. And it back then I wasn't thinking like, oh, I like hip hop. It was just like, oh, I like the Beastie Boys. I didn't think of it as I didn't think of them as so much as rappers. I was just like, oh, I like this music.
You just like the music. Yeah. You just like music.
And it wasn't until later on that I really dug into the Beastie Boys and really appreciated them and fell in love with all of their albums. And I loved Hello Nasty, which came out in, I think, 98. That's the one with Intergalactic. I loved that album when I was young. I was probably in elementary school when that came out. And I have to shout out my stepmom, Amanda, because she loved the Beastie Boys as well. And she saw them live when they toured with Run DMC back in 85 or 86. So she had always been a huge Beastie Boys fan. So she would always bump them in the car, and she's the one who actually told me about Paul's Boutique, because I didn't really know about Paul's Boutique back then. I was too young to like dig through all their albums, and she's like, no, you gotta listen to Paul's Boutique. That's the best Beastie Boys album. I was like, okay. And listening to it when I was young, obviously I didn't fully understand or appreciate everything, but I definitely was attracted to it. I love the sound of this album. I love the sampling, because even just listening it to today, it doesn't sound like an album from 1989. if you compare this to a Run DMC album that came out around the same time, they sound completely different. Nothing sounded like this before. This is
it's unique because it incorporates a lot of rock for sure.
Yeah, well, the sampling is insane. No album before or after has used this many samples.
Must have been really hard to clear and get it through.
Well, that's the thing. They were only able to clear this album because there's rumors that there's close to 300 samples on this album.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, one song could have 4 samples on it.
Yeah, and so the thing was the big lawsuit, I forget who it was with, didn't happen yet. So they could clear this album, clear all these samples for cheap. I think they reported it cost them $250,000 to clear all the samples, which is nothing. It sounds like a lot, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not.
Today,
for the 80s, that sounds like a lot.
Right, but for today, $250,000 might clear you for 2 songs. With you got to pay the writers, you got to pay the publishers, all this stuff. So in that sense, it's an album that can't be remade. It can't be duplicated. You couldn't do this type of album. They're sampling the Beatles a shit ton on this. They're sampling famous artists, Bob Dylan, and all these other crazy samples that they're getting from all kinds of artists. They're sampling Funkadelic,
Sly and the Family Stone.
Yeah, they're sampling everyone.
Curtis Mayfield.
And it's not the Beastie Boys sampling, so it's the Dust Brothers, who are, we'll get into that later, but they're DJs, production duo, and they go on to produce for a lot of other famous people.
So you mentioned that your stepmom said this is one of their greater albums, right?
Yeah.
When I was looking into this, it was saying that when this album first dropped, it was it's shit.
Right. Yeah. No one liked it when it came out.
Mm. And when critics do stuff, it's always subjective. I don't feel like whatever they say really does need to be taken with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. But what is it? And I have my own views on this album, but what about this music? And I look at music by like the beats, the lyrics, the content, the flows, just that all around package. What is it that really stands out to you that makes them a favorite?
For me, first and foremost, it's the production. I love the music on this album. It's just so different and it's very timeless because of the sampling. In terms of the lyrics, it's not my favorite Beastie Boys album in terms of lyrics. I think they do a better job later on in their next 3 albums. They go in a completely different direction and they change up their lyrics. But this album is really fun. It's fun lyrics. They're almost like they're over the top. They're being rowdy, immature kids on an album, on a hip hop album.
I got a lot of teenage angst.
Yeah, a lot of teenage angst, and almost like built up bravado or like fake bravado. They're talking a lot of shit. They're talking about guns and beating up people, but they're not. You look at them and you're like, these guys aren't doing that. And I think they're aware of that. I think they're doing it in jest. They're not being serious. They're not the rappers that are pretending to be tough. They're being tough in a way where it's like they're telling a story or it's a movie or a TV show in that sense.
So that's where I kind of hit this conundrum because in a lot of the tracks on here, I can get with egging things like that. Okay, I can see you guys doing that.
Oh, I love that song.
But like, stealing cars, robbing people, kicking the bailiff in the knees, things like that. Like right. I'm not sold on that. But on the other hand, I can think of any other hip hop artist. I'll bring up 50 Cent. Did 50 Cent shoot anybody? Did Jay-Z stab someone? Yes, he did. I can't really see him doing it, but he also doesn't rap about it though at the same time. Right. But I'm trying to think of artists that are really like G-Unit, how they're just like, I drove up on someone,
right? Put
a couple rounds in the house and then drove off. And it's like, I don't really feel that. And I guess I don't like it. Because it's just not realistic. But then I look at the Beastie Boys talking about this stuff, and it's like, that's not realistic either. So I guess
they're doing it in a joking way.
But I'm not laughing.
Well, that's it's still a joke though. They're not being serious. They're not saying we're from the street and we're serious about robbing your car. They're more telling a story of robbing a car. It's like watching a violent movie. Yeah, yes, you don't agree with the violence in it, but it's still entertainment.
I think as I talk out loud, I'm starting to because I'm like, I don't want to single out the Beastie Boys and what they're talking about and not liking it. But at the same time, someone else is doing something similar, way more extreme. But it's like, yeah, this is actually a dumbass story.
Right. I mean, we could talk about this all day. We could, bring in Eminem and how he wants to stab and kill people in his family. That doesn't mean he's going to do it.
But I laughed.
He's doing it for shock value. And I think Eminem gets that from the Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys were using shock value.
So I'm going to tell you what my overall rap thoughts were on this album.
Before getting into all the songs?
Well, we're going to get into the songs, but it's just you were talking about the things that you liked about it and everything. So kind of going, maybe it's just to kind of set the precedence of where I come from with this album. So I think personally with rock, I'm not too big into it. There's only a select kind of couple bands that I really listen to.
Yeah.
But with rock, it's different than hip hop for me because I'm listening to every individual instrument. So I'm looking for that guitar. I'm looking for how they hit that bass line. I'm hearing how the drums kick and everything like that, the cymbals. And I'm looking for any other, there's a saxophone in there too. Let me listen to that for a second. So I hear all these things, and I just want that to set for when we get into, it's not even that far away, but when we get into Highway Drifter, I just want to set that precedence. But as a blanket thing, overall, there's too much going in this album for me to focus on. It's like I'm listening to one thing, and then another comes up, and then I have to focus on their lyrics, but they're all screaming at the same time, and then kind of going around.
So it's dense. It's a little too dense.
It's very dense and very packed full of a lot of things.
Yeah, especially with the production. Yeah, there's a lot of layers to every song.
It's very
There's
layered.
a lot of stuff going on.
And so and as I say that, I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm not saying that that makes the music sound really shitty, but it wasn't what I'm looking for. It's not a good fit for me in terms of listening for things.
Yeah. And I think if you listen to the Beastie Boys' next 2 or 3 albums, it's definitely different than this. It's not this layered because this was produced by the Dust Brothers, and they took it in a totally. They revolutionized hip hop in a way, because no album was made like this before it came out. You couldn't find an album like this.
And I think to be fair as well, it's not just the Beastie Boys. And again, speaking out loud, it's making me realize things. I think it's really the rock component, and there's too much going on. Because, if I'm listening through Lil Wayne's discography and I'm Not a Human Being comes on, I'm not really listening to the album. I didn't really like it. If we're going to talk about Revival by Eminem, I didn't like that album either. It's a lot of rock components. If we're going to look at what is it? Not Misery Loves Company, but another Tech 9 album where he went pretty rock. I'm not listening to that either. So already, rock and hip hop is not the best fit for me. So I guess that's just to be fair. I'm not just going to sing all the Beastie Boys.
All right. Well, with that said, I think we should get into the album.
Let's hit it.
So the first song is, well, not a song, but the intro to the album is To All the Girls. And it starts off with a subtle guitar and light drumming, and it's just MCA talking about all the different girls that they want to shout out.
Yeah,
it's such a teenage, early 20s, guy thing to make a song about or to start an album off with.
With this very mellow, low key beat? It doesn't really fit the album for me personally.
No, they almost set you up to be hit in the head with how Shake Your Rump starts. It's it starts off, the intro to All the Girls is calm, and it slowly fades in with a guitar, and then all of a sudden it goes into Shake Your Rump, and it's fast drumming in your face and just kind of wakes you up.
And I can see that because I can't say that I've been to a show where they start you off kind of mellow. I love live music of all genres.
Yeah.
It's way different than, I'm over here talking about I don't really like rock and hip hop. But if I see it live, I'm in it. But yeah, I do. So I do like that setup of starting slow and going in. But I guess album wise, I'm like, they're just kind of
right. Yeah, live wise, it would make more sense.
It'd make more sense.
Yeah,
live-wise.
You have to remember, if you don't know, the Beastie Boys were a punk band before they did hip hop. Mm-hmm. So their foundation is loud, fast-paced music. That's where they come from.
Mm-hmm. They lost 2 band members out of that switch from the punk rock to the hip hop.
And they met Rick Rubin, and they kind of just like, okay, we're gonna go to the hip hop route. So after that, it leads into Shake Your Rump. It's a loud transition. It's got loud drums, and this track, which I think we're starting to see a theme or a pattern. Most hip hop albums, especially from the 80s and early 90s, the first track is, all right, I need to talk my shit and
start hip hop and let you know where I'm
hip hop
from, what
and
I'm all about.
lay down the law is like, I'm the shit. I'm out rapping everyone. Everyone else, you guys are posers and you guys are copycats.
And we're doing whippets.
Yeah.
Which is like, what the fuck?
They're doing a lot of shit in this. They do a lot of drugs in this album.
So, I mean, that's fine. It's just like they do drugs here and there, but like there's just like corny stuff layered here and there. It's like, who the fuck does whippets?
I think they're having fun. Like they're literally sitting around getting high and joking, talking shit. But this is the thing that I love about the Beastie Boys. They finish each other's raps perfectly. You don't hear groups doing that anymore, where one rapper will say one line, then they finish that line, and the next rapper comes in. It's nowadays they do a whole verse. You know what? And then the next rapper gets their verse. I love that they finish each other's lines.
I was curious about that because it's done so perfectly that I almost wonder if they're going in
how they're recording it,
and they're recording lines and then editing them together, because there's no way that I'm going to say blah, blah, blah and stop, and then you come in at the exact moment to finish off.
Honestly, I don't know how they record it. That's a great question. And I've read the Beastie Boys book, and I've read the book on this album, 33 and a Third. And I can't remember if they mentioned that, how they recorded. But that's really interesting.
They have to edit it. There's no other way.
I think, from what if I can recall, one of them would write like the verse, and then they would go, okay, I'm going to say this line, you say that line, I'm going to say this line. And then I think they all go into the booth together and just, they go line for line.
Who writes the lyrics?
It's all of them. It's mixed. You'd have to like really dig and research to find out who wrote exactly what lyrics.
Yeah.
But they all write.
I ask that because in songs like this where, it feels like at times one does have more lines than the other. Mm-hmm. Who is it? MCA?
He has the lower
voice, right? Yeah. He doesn't have as many lines as Mike D. Mike D seems to have the most. Mm-hmm. And then Ad Rock has the second most, and then MCA has like the least amount.
Yeah.
And so it kind of made me wonder, like, does Mike D do like most of the writing?
Yeah.
And then they all fill in, or they'll be like, they all probably collaborate.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? These first 2 albums, you don't really get a sense of their individualism yet. Mm-hmm. It's not till the later albums where you get to understand more of them individually. You
get a track in here where they do
their own verse.
And I think there's only one of those.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you a question. So this is the one thing I respect is that it's very high energy. Mm-hmm. We could not, I mean, maybe I think of Royce, maybe I think of, not Eminem for sure, Royce, KRS-One, where it's more of like this high energy but casual kind of talk.
Yeah.
This isn't screaming, but you have to have a pretty raised voice for this, right? So my question for you is, because you've been like, Eminem and his scream raps, not me. Right. How is this different?
This is different in the sense that they're not yelling at me. They're yelling at the song. Eminem is angry when he yells, and he's yelling at me, and it's annoying. I don't want to hear that.
Are you okay?
Yeah,
He's yelling at me, and
he's yelling at
like
me.
it.
It gets old, and with the Beastie Boys, it more has to do with their tone of their voice than them yelling, because Mike D and Ad Rock have high pitched voices. Mm-hmm. I think it more has to do with that than them yelling, and it's not on every song. They're not screaming. I think there's songs where they're screaming more than others. But with Eminem, that's not his tone of voice. He's like purposely doing that. It's not like he just has a high pitched voice and he can't help it.
All right.
So yeah, that's what I would say with it. And Eminem, that's a fairly newer thing that he's been doing within the last 6 years.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I was just kind of curious. I don't know. I did theater in high school, and one of the projects that we did was Shakespeare Abridged, and there was the part with Othello. Who do you think got cast for that? And it was a rapping scene, and it was definitely that high energy. And I had mentioned earlier I didn't listen to Beastie Boys, but it reminds me of that energy and that tone bringing into that. So this reminds me of theater with them rapping.
Yeah, and like I said before, it mostly, with them rapping the way that they do, it comes from being in the punk scene. Because when you're in punk, that's what it's high energy and you're screaming into the mic. And it's more about your energy than the lyrics. You know, it's what you're bringing to the live scene.
Yeah. And, and I see them bringing a lot of that into the next song of, bringing that energy, that light and just kind of fun stuff into Johnny Royale, where and just making fun of a homeless person. Yeah,
they're telling a story. It's a fictional story, but it's based off of a real guy that would hang out at their apartment in New York. This homeless guy who was just around, and so they kind of made up this story of what his life was and that he was a rockabilly star, and somehow he ended up he drank a lot and did drugs, and he just ended up as a homeless guy. So I don't think they were making fun of him. It was more of they're creating a backstory for him. And I didn't know that until I did the research for this podcast. I always just listened to it as just like a weird story that they told. And this isn't my favorite song on the album. It's probably on the lower tier of songs for me. I'm not a huge fan of the beat. But now that I know where the idea from the song came from, I kind of like it a little bit more.
It's weird. I felt that a few times through the pod as well, where you get background information and you're like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of a better song.
Yeah, it's not just a random song about a homeless dude. There's some context to it. It's like, oh, they knew this guy and they would see him all the time, and they're just like, oh, let's make a backstory for him. He was a rockabilly star.
That's fine, I guess. All right. I mean, I agree with you. I wasn't really feeling this track. I mean, I wasn't feeling really any of them. But this one is not the worst one.
Yeah.
It's all right. Yeah. Eggman.
I mean, dude,
I've
how do you not love this beat? They sampled Curtis Mayfield, Superfly. It's obviously I would love for other artists to be able to sample that and make a dope hip hop song out of it.
It could have been better. I mean, I was kind of like, oh shit, this song is a classic. This song's dope.
Yeah.
And I wasn't feeling what they did with the feature. I just wasn't. But
with the content of the song, what it's about.
This is nitpicky. There's a part where it kind of goes up and then back down. And
right. Yeah. It's a really funny song. Obviously they're being stupid kids, young guys throwing eggs at people and doing drive-bys of egging. And I mean, I can relate to it. I did water balloon launching when I was younger. In high school, we would launch water balloons at cars and at people's houses. It's a very similar thing, and it's fun, it's stupid, and it's just what you do when you're young. You do stupid shit. And I love that they make a song out of it. They're not ashamed of doing it. They're just like, yeah, we're young and dumb and we did this shit. But it's not, the lyrics aren't without some depth to it. One of the lyrics is, you made the mistake and judge a man by his race. You go through life with egg on your face. Woke up in the morning, peculiar feeling, looked up and saw egg dropping from the ceiling. The family, punk rocks, the businessman, I'll dog everybody with egg in my hand. It's not like the crack that you put in the pipe, but crack on your forehead, here's a towel, now wipe.
Yeah, I feel like in this song, like anyone can catch this egg.
Yeah. Like if you're a racist, you're going to have egg on your face.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't need people like you. You know, we're just going to throw egg at you. And, you know, it's they're having fun with it, but they're throwing little things in there of depth that you might not get if you're just listening to the song and you're like, what the fuck is this? Like they're throwing eggs at people.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of went over my head, but I don't know. It's just like, I ran away with it. It's a song about egging people. So it's like, that's cool.
You're taking it too seriously.
I just was like, oh, cool. They're egging people. But I mean, I like the line that you just read. Like, I think that's cool. You know, anyone can catch this egg. Like, that's just their way of getting back at people. Because, you know, most people, well, what else are you going to do in the 80s? Nowadays, you can, like, roast them online or troll or do whatever. It's like, what are you going to do back then?
Yeah, egging is like trolling, but in real life.
Yeah, so that's some that's some real ass trolling, and that's respectable, and I like that. So that's cool. But I don't know. I mean, when you're egging people and doing other shit, you become a High Plains drifter, I guess. So this, when I was building up to, there was too much going on in this track for me.
Yeah. But that beat is fucking fire. I do not love this beat.
No, it's not that fire. I mean,
Where did you listen to this at? If you were not bumping in this car, huh?
No, I listened to this. I was putting my dresser together, and as I was just kind of hanging out in the house.
You need the bass, man.
But I like the overlapping of the High Plains drifter and then him rapping on the side. But when I first heard this song, I sent you a text. I was like, I don't like this album. I don't like this shit.
True story. He sent me it, and I was like, okay. I guess we got to change the album now.
I was like, nah,
but he powered through.
We ain't switching. But, you know, I do kind of feel this track. But it was just like, as I was saying, with different instruments, and then you have the High Plains drifter and overlapping with the raps. It was just like, what do I focus on? What am I? Because I always listen. I listen for content. I listen to the beat first, and it's like, okay, this is easy enough. And then I go for the lyrics, but I don't know what to listen to.
I think because this album, I think you're experiencing what people experienced when this album first came out. And then 10 years later, they're like, oh, this is a classic hip-hop album. Because it's so dense, and there's so much going on, you can't fully understand it in the first couple of listens. You can't catch everything.
I think I've listened to this album more than I did other albums that we've done.
Yeah. But I've been listening to this album for 20 years.
I've been listening to this album for a week.
Right.
So, I don't know. Like, I like the track now. But yeah, there was just a lot. But
yeah, the sampling definitely, you know, sometimes it's hard to focus on the lyrics because there's so much going on in the background that it's easy to miss stuff. For sure.
This was one of the tracks where I was starting to appreciate some of the storytelling because it's very, like, their lyrics are very, they're very easy to understand.
Yeah, they're very straightforward.
Very straightforward. And so, you know, it starts off with them, was that the first verse where they got caught driving? I don't remember.
Yeah, was it making like a DT, driving a Grand Fury, wherever I hang my hat's my home, and my past is kind of blurry. Every dog has his day. Mine will be in front of a jury. High Plains drifter, you know that I'm never in a hurry.
Yeah, and then the second verse, he gets caught, but then he makes an escape and gets out, and that transitions into the third verse. And so I don't know. I mean, I kind of vibed with it a little bit, and I was like, all right, that's cool. I'm not believing in it because it's like I kicked the bailiff, I took his wallet. And then I bet on some horses, and then I won money. And it's like, all right.
It's hyperbole.
I guess. But it reminded me of like Pirates of the Caribbean. It's like, you'll always remember this day as the time you almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow. And it's like he still like gets off and gets his shit. And it's like, all right, cool. So that's what I kind of thought of there. All right. This one
Sounds of Science
is the most annoying song
really
on this
album. I love this one. This is one of my favorite songs in the album.
Of Science.
And then when it goes into the beat, woo,
nah, man,
shit is fire.
Lost me on that.
Oh my god,
Shit was annoying.
You didn't like that transition?
No. Meow. Meow.
It's a really funny song about hooking up with girls. When he says, had to get up and get the Jimmy protector, went berserk and worked and exploded. She woke up in the morning and her face was coated. I never knew what that, like, as a kid, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, what the fuck is a Jimmy protector? Yeah. And what's on her face that's coated?
It's just sleepies that are on her face.
No, that shit's funny, dude.
Yeah, it's whatever. But maybe this will be one of the tracks. Like, I remember Werewolves of London playing on the radio station at the old place I worked at, and I hated that song. I couldn't stand it. Yeah. Now I like it. Yeah. So I could see this one, like, as it marinates, me being like, okay, fine.
You gotta let it marinate for a bit.
But the way they sing the chorus, I was like, shut the fuck up. It's the sound.
Rope-a-dope.
So, and I was trying to, like, I don't know. When I'm irritated, I kind of just, like, go through something kind of quick. So, like, I was trying to read the lyrics and, like, they just weren't settling for me. I was like, I need to read this over and over and over because I don't have the years of listening. So, no. But I was just like,
but obviously music, I think we've touched on this before. Music brings back memories.
Oh yeah, 100.
So for me, this brings back a lot of my childhood. Listening to this with family, like we all love this album. We all blasted it all the time. So it like brings back good memories. Mm-hmm. So even if a song to you is like, oh, that's annoying, I'm like, it just reminds me of good times.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I feel that.
So even listening to now, I can see how if you haven't heard this before, how that like some of the songs you'd be like, at first you'd be like, the fuck is this? Like, this is just annoying white dudes screaming in the mic.
Well, I didn't say that. I just said it's a bunch of screaming in a mic.
I know what you mean.
Didn't say that. But yeah, I don't know. It's like they alternate screaming and a mic, I guess. So, but then they switch it up with the 3-minute rule where they finally. I like this song because I did like the beat. It was very like what was the term? Dub. I think it was. Incorporate some dub into it. But what I liked about it too is that it finally like broke them up.
Right, they get their own verse.
Yeah, because I mean, like in a group, like I want to hear people individually. If we're listening to Slaughterhouse, it's like, yeah, like because I know what Royce and what King Crooked sound like, yeah, I want to hear what they sound like individually.
Right.
Throughout this whole album up until now, they basically have the same style. It's the same style, right, but then bringing in a different voice.
They're working as one. It's one voice, like you said, it's one voice.
Yeah, and that's cool. So like I respect that throughout the entire album, but I like that it's broken up so then it gives me the opportunity to hear, okay, now what do you guys sound like apart? Like it'd be interesting to see, going off the assumption of how we think that they may be creating their tracks. If you had Royce, Crooked, Joel, and Joey creating one verse all together and
finishing each other's lines and stuff.
Yeah, but if they all work together on one verse,
they did that a little bit. Joel Ortiz and Joe Budden did that on a few. They did that on a handful of songs where they traded each other's verses, like lines and stuff like that. And they didn't do it all the time. They did it every once in a while. But I always enjoyed when they did it because I think when you do that live, it works really well. It's more exciting to have. They trade back and forth quickly and
trading back and forth and then like blending your styles together for one verse. And I think that's cool. So that's why I'm saying like it's cool. I like what the Beastie Boys did with this album by blending together, but it's really just like one sound alternating voices throughout the whole thing. So this one gives you the opportunity to like, okay, like I'm kind of curious what MCA sounds like by himself.
Right.
Ad Rock and Mike D sound similar? What do they sound like by themselves? Especially for a first-time listener.
Right.
Because if you have two people that... I remember going back to Slaughterhouse, I couldn't tell... I had a hard time telling the difference between...
Royce and Crook.
Royce and Crook. It's like, okay, well, in terms of talent, you can differentiate them, but sometimes they sound very similar. But definitely Crooked has more wordplay than Royce does. Now, if they dropped an album together, that'd be debatable, or you could argue that, but probably not. But this one, it gave me like, okay, that's who Adam D is. Sorry.
Yeah, it's good, and it's a funny song. They're talking about hooking up with girls and doing drugs and like MCA is my favorite out of all of them.
MCA is your favorite?
Yeah, I've always connected with MCA more than anyone.
If I were to pick one, I think it would be Mike D.
Yeah,
I feel like lyrically he puts the best rhymes together. MCA's voice is kind of flat. And
MCA doesn't have the best rhymes, but I like what he says in his songs. But yeah, some of MCA's lines is a lot of parents like to think I'm a villain. I'm just chilling like Bob Dylan. Yeah, I smoke Chiba. It helps me with my brain. I might be a little dusted, but I'm not insane. People come to me and they try to talk shit. Man, I was making records when you were sucking your mother's dick.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when he drops that, like it hits you. Like, oh shit, what did he just say? But yeah, I think they're dope lyrics. Like even if they're a little raunchy or they're edgy, he's talking about, hey, like, yeah, from our first album, all the parents hated us because we were basically frat rappers, drinking beer and just hooking up with girls. And he's like, nah, I'm just chilling. I'm smoking weed, listening to Bob Dylan. Like I'm not insane. I'm not a crazy person. And if you want to talk shit to me that I'm a one-hit wonder rapper, like I was making music for a long time, way before that. So you can't talk shit to me. I've been doing this.
Yeah, definitely putting his record out there and stuff. Like, try it. So, yeah, that's cool. In the next track, they can kind of continue the speak on women and everything with "Hey, ladies." I did like the line, "I'm telling her every lie that you know that I never did." And I was like, okay, that's cool. So, I just imagined, especially as younger 20s, just spitting all this game and lying your way through to get laid. Is this one where they're saying Rapunzel let down your hair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me get into your under. No, wait, that might be a different song.
It may have been one of the earlier ones, but
no, that's 2 songs from now.
Oh, my bad. Sorry for the spoiler alert. But
it's all good. There's a lot of lines about girls in this album.
Yeah, but I kind of picked up a couple. I know it's like meant to be like entertaining and funny, but I was like, this is kind of corny. Like they're like talking about kicking her in the booty, and then like they called her a crab, and I was like, yeah, those are like those hit home. Those are hard lyrics. So I mean, it's funny.
Yeah. I mean it's debauchery, and it's they're young kids, and what's cool about the Beastie Boys is that after this album, they completely did a 180 with their lyrics. They went completely away from the misogynistic, drug-filled, violent raps. Because they became... MCA, initially, he was the first one. He became Buddhist. So he completely went away from anything violent, anything drug-related, anything like that in their next few albums and going forward. So it's really interesting to see their evolution as a band, as a group. And they did so many more things after this album. They could have quit. They could have just been one-hit wonders and just called it a day. It's like, oh yeah, our second album sucked. Like let's just not do it anymore. But they kept going, and then they got even bigger. By just being more true to themselves. I don't think, especially on Ill Communication and on this album, they weren't really being true to themselves. They're trying to play up this act of being these crazy white kids from Brooklyn, which they go away from. But that doesn't. For me, I still love this album, even if it's full of debauchery and crazy shit.
Yeah, that's all cool. But it's expressed in corny fashion, which I think is the point to make it funny. So yeah, it just missed me a little bit. But I don't know. I'm not trying to miss out on this 5-piece chicken dinner though.
Gotta love that chicken dinner.
So that was going on here, just like a transition to
it's just like a rockabilly country interlude.
Yeah, it sounded cool.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. For the next one, Looking Down the Barrel of a Gun, this is definitely the rockier of all the songs so far for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I vibed with it a little bit, but it's still kind of like outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah. It's a cool song. I kind of like it more now that I really dug into the lyrics. Because it's a really violent song, but they're referencing violent movies. It's almost a soundtrack to a violent movie. I look at this song now. And they're referencing Rambo, Clockwork Orange, Die Hard. And it's very upbeat. And there's a lot of guns and, violence and, putting steak on your face because you got into a fist fight. It's very much this bravado. And when you look at the Beastie Boys, you don't think violence. You don't think, oh, these guys are fighting people. But I look at them as good writers in the sense of, oh, they're just writing a violent song, much like a writer would write a violent movie. The people who wrote Die Hard and Rambo, they weren't in the forest killing people. They're just writers. They're writing a story.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I think for the content of the song, I think the beat fits it perfectly because it kind of just I'll speak for myself. It just kind of puts you in this rage, I'm about ready to fuck something up.
Right. Yeah.
I think of A Clockwork Orange because I watched that recently, and they're just running into town.
It's just
aside from the raping.
Yeah, it's unabashed violence. It's it's shocking. To see it on a movie like Clockwork Orange or to hear it in these lyrics.
I don't know. I guess not the violence continues, but the misconduct continues in Car Thief.
The misconduct.
And Car Thief.
Car Thief. Dude, I fucking love this beat. This is a classic right here.
Is it?
Yeah. Dude, this beat is crazy. But yeah, there's a lot of shit going on in this. They're referencing a lot of drug use, doing PCP, angel dust, cocaine, but I think they're telling another story again. They're saying some of the lines are, I'm a dusted old bummy, hurdy-gurdy man, 5-0 caught me, now I'm going to the mountains, say goodbye to my girl, my lawyer, and my accountant. My mind is kind of rhyming, and I think I ought to think. So it's just they're on the run from the cops and they got to go hide out and, they got to say goodbye to their normal life and they're on the run now. They're fugitives.
Yeah, from that verse, it made me think of, I wonder if those are the thoughts that go through, in the movies. So when a criminal does something and they're on the run, is that, your accountant and all these other people and really saying your last farewell and stuff because you can try and make it out alive. I don't know. So, but yeah, no, the beat's cool. I like the beat. The scratching on it's pretty tight. So
yeah, back when they did scratching.
Back then.
But listening to this, do you think 1989 when you hear this? I feel like this could come out in 1998 or 99, and it would sound just the same.
That's a hard one because as you ask that question, I think of breaking the album up. There's certain songs that I could hear for the time it came out. Some that maybe this one can come out later. I think I agree with you on that. But then there's some that I'm this could have come out in 86 or so. Or
the more rock songs? Yeah.
Come out a little bit.
Because with Rick Rubin, that was very much the thing, the style to do. So after Car Thief, it's What Comes Around. And this is the one with the Rapunzel line.
Oh, gotcha. It makes me think of like the saying, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Mm-hmm. But it's just like you get the gist of like low people and low places and the stuff that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this beat on this song, and there's some really funny lines in this, like Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair so I can climb up and get into your underwear. You rat soup eating, test cheating, no business punk. You're insecure, born in the junkyard with the junk.
Ouch. That hurts my feelings a little bit.
Shit's funny, man.
Oh, I like the piano in the back.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a cool beat. I like that one too.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of my favorite songs on the album, for sure. I really like this one.
I can see that. That's a fair thing to say. I don't know what I would want to compete with. It's up there.
But I think the next song, which is pretty much the last, full song, I guess, on the album is Shadrock. And I love the beat. I love the energy. And they're referencing 3 prophets from the Torah or the Bible. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Nice.
And so they were all given Hebrew names because they were all thrown into a furnace and God saved them. They didn't die. And then they came back and they were, God rescued them because they didn't bow down to an idol. They weren't idolizing something else. So God rewarded them, and they were, gifted with being wise and having wisdom and knowing history. So relating that to the Beastie Boys, I think they looked at it as, okay, we're these 3 prophets, and we didn't idolize Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin and Def Jam, and we were able to escape them, to escape the furnace, which was Def Jam, because they were trying to control us and tell us what to do. We got away from that, and now we're doing our own thing, and we don't need them to survive.
It's pretty layered.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, they got away from Def Jam for a reason, because they didn't want to be those frat rappers forever. That's not who they were. That's just what they were told to do so that they could sell a shit ton of records. Some of the lines that I really like is equinox symmetry and the balance is right. Smoking and drinking on a Tuesday night. It's not how you play the game, it's how you win it. I cheat and steal and sin, and I'm a cynic. For those about to rock, we salute you. Just saying, like, we're gonna do whatever you want. We're gonna win, and we're gonna continue to do it our way. We're not gonna try to play games or play the politics or play the label game. We're gonna go somewhere where they let us do what we want. But they would later come to find with Capitol Records with this album, they didn't really push this album. Capitol had some changes. That I think their president or whatever quit before this album came out, so they didn't really promote it. They just kind of like, oh, I guess we'll release it, and that's it. So the Beastie Boys were unhappy with that, but they stayed with Capitol because Capitol just basically said, do whatever you want. We don't care. We're not going to tell you what to make. Just do it, and you can have money to make it.
Man, it sucks to hear like when labels and studios really get in the way of someone's artistic expression. I recently watched Fantastic Four, the new one that came out. It's a really shitty movie. And so like it was originally supposed to be like 3 hours long, and then they cut stuff and then refilmed things. There were relationships with actors and the producers that weren't going too well. And so like it's just overall really bad. But it sucks because it sounds like it would have been really good. And I don't know. It just makes me think of like, them not having issues like putting out what they want without having a lot of outside input and like what could have happened. So I don't know. It's like it'd be cool to see like have people that you just drop something the way that you intend it, and not having someone be like, oh, well,
right,
nah.
Which the Beastie Boys were afforded. They were able to do that with this album, and the rest of their albums. They were able to do whatever they wanted and put out whatever they wanted. They didn't have to try to make singles to top what they did on Ill Communication. You know, like Fight for Your Right to Party and Brass Monkey. And they weren't asked to remake those. They did whatever they wanted. They didn't try to make singles. They kind of stuck to themselves. And MCA, I think, you know, he was very aware of that. In his lines, in one of his lines, he says, "Smoke the holy chalice, got my own religion, rally around the stage and check the funky dope musicians." You know, he's saying there's a lot of depth there where he's saying there's a lot of meaning behind the music. I'm creating my own religion, and, you know, I'm going to be around dope musicians, and that's going to be where I get my understanding from. That's what's going to be my religion. Is doing this music thing. So they take the lyrics aren't serious, but I think they take the music serious.
I think so. I mean, I think they're just doing their own thing and having a good time with it, and you know, definitely caught on with the large audience of people, and it worked.
Yeah,
so.
Definitely worked. And then not the last, but the outro is "Ask for Janice," which is just an interlude with a guy on the phone telling you to buy clothes from Paul's Boutique.
Why is this album called Paul's Boutique?
It's a fictional. It's an actual store that they shopped out, Lee's Sportswear in New York, and then they just made up a fictional Paul's Boutique where you would buy suits at. Yeah, I don't.
Oh, that was the end of the story.
Yeah, that's it. They just made it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very.
I know, but there's deeper meaning to it. I don't know if they've officially said this, but people have said that it's related to a Beatles song. That it's kind of playing on the Beatles theme. Just because of how like crazy all the sounds are in the album.
Okay.
And how it's experimental. So then the album doesn't end there. It ends with the B-Boy Bouillabaisse. And this is a suite of about 9 different, I wouldn't call them songs. They're like vignettes or samples or just like short, like minute-long songs. But some of these beats are super dope.
Man, when I was first listening to this one, I think I was laying down and just running through them, and I heard the sample for "Who's That Lady?" And I was like, I couldn't go back and figure out which track it was. And I was like, fuck. But I just saw it, and it's a year and a day. But that was probably one of my favorite ones out of that whole thing.
Yeah. I love "Hello Brooklyn." Like that bass is just crazy.
That is a cool one.
Yeah. And I think that one was made not by the Dust Brothers. I think that was made by Mike D or Ad Rock. He had an MPC. But yeah, it's a cool way to end the album. It's just like a bunch of different songs right after one another, and you know, it kind of brings the energy back up before you leave. You know, it's almost like the end credits on the Marvel movies. You know, you stay, it's quiet down, you read all the credits, and then you get to the end, and then there's like a crazy scene that gets you hyped up again, and you're like, okay, I'm ready for more.
It also reminds me of like, remember, I don't know if movies do it nowadays, but remember like in 90s movies where it would start going through, like, it would play a little bit of the song and then immediately go to the next one, then the next one, the next one. So I kind of like want to combine old movies with Marvel to where it's like that those last 5 minutes or so is getting you through these tracks to like eventually get you to the end, which I welcomed hearing the end. But I'm trying to remember if there were other ones. I really, like I said, I really liked A Year and a Day. 59 Christie. Christie Street was pretty dope. I kind of like that slow kind of bass happening, and just that strumming on the guitar. That was pretty dope. AWOL
was dope.
AWOL was cool.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the production before we get into our final thoughts on the album. So this album was produced by the Dust Brothers, who were in LA and they were DJs at clubs. And they originally made this album to be an instrumental album. And they're going to give these songs to the clubs to play there, just as like songs to dance to or be at the club with. And I forget if it was Mike D or Ad Rock. They were at the guy who started Delicious Vinyl. They were at his house, and the Dust Brothers were there playing beats from this album. And the Beastie Boys heard this, and they're like, "Shit, can we buy these songs from you? Can we rap over these?" And they're like, "Well, these songs are really sample heavy. Do you want us to strip them down and make them more, just plain, less dense?" And they're like, "No, we want to rap over them like this." So like you were feeling, like there's so much going on in these, there's so many samples, it's hard to concentrate. That's how they felt about it, with adding lyrics. So that wasn't the original idea. They didn't want to add lyrics to these songs. But the Beastie Boys were like, "Nah, fuck that. We want to do that." So I think that's a really cool way of how this album came about. It wasn't really on purpose. It just kind of happened. And the Dust Brothers, they're kind of mysterious. There's not a lot of information on them, but they have worked with a lot of big artists. They went on to produce, I think, 3 or 4 Beck albums. They produced Hanson Bebop. I know you're familiar with that one.
Never heard of them.
You've definitely heard that song.
Never heard of
Bop.
Never heard of them.
They produced. They did a lot of movie soundtracks. They did Fight Club. They did the soundtrack to that. So they're just kind of like this odd group that just like done some like crazy shit. They've made a lot of hits, but when they made this album, they're just DJs, just making beats, and the Beastie Boys found them and decided to rap over them.
That was pretty cool. Little thing about Fight Club, personally, I think the movie's great, but the ending to the book is better.
Interesting.
If I could combine those, I would. So
that's a good shout out.
That's
so overall, how do you feel about this album after going through it, as opposed to when you walked into it?
When I walked into it, I was 4 tracks in, and I was like, I don't want to listen to the rest of this.
Yeah.
Now having finished it, I'm like, I still don't really want to listen to it.
Yeah.
But I'm not inclined to listen to any more of their music either. Mm-hmm. But for what it is, I think that I can see how it appeals to certain audiences of
AKA white people.
Their humor or like their content is definitely a lot less. It's watered down than like typical hip hop, I would say. Mm-hmm. So it's not aggressive in the sense of like I'm running up in your house with this 12 gauge. I'm tying up your family, doing all this. They're talking about egging people and like robbing someone without any consequences to that person that's, injurious or fatal or anything like that. So it's very like their content and their lyrics are very mild. Right. And it's also not something that you have to sit there and decipher either. It's very straightforward and right there for you.
Right.
So, and it incorporates a lot of rock. And so if you can use hip hop and the storytelling in that and the styling within that to something that like really reaches out to a big audience, you kind of you figured it out. Like that's a working formula right there.
Yeah, I just love how unique this album is. It's never been done before or after, which I think is really cool. I don't know. It's definitely, sometimes it's my favorite Beastie Boy album. Sometimes I really like Check Your Head. Sometimes I really like Hello Nasty. I go back and forth between a lot of their albums, but definitely Paul's Boutique has a special place for me. The beats are just so crazy, and I love all the samples. I love that it doesn't sound like it's from 1989. I think it's only, when I got into like high school that I realized this album was from the 80s. Like I didn't know that when I was younger. I just thought it was more of a recent album. I thought this album came out after their next 3 albums.
There's also times, I forgot to say this because it really accentuated itself in the second track, but they oftentimes sound like Eazy-E in their rhyme scheme. And so that's where like, okay, this is definitely an 80s album for me because no one raps like that.
Right.
But yeah. So overall, like I said, I'm not revisit, but is it the worst thing I've ever heard? Like, no, definitely not.
Yeah.
I think things annoy me more when I really have to pull a dictionary out, metaphorically speaking, and like really decipher what you're trying to talk about. I get what these dudes are talking about. I just don't.
You think it's worse when they're being more cryptic?
I don't like cryptic music. Yeah. I don't like cryptic people. So yeah, this is very straightforward, but it's so straightforward that it's just like it's on the table with their time. I was like, I don't care. Right. So, but it's not bad. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I definitely love the Beastie Boys. This is always a fun album to revisit. I think it's just like it's a good time. It's like watching your favorite, action movie or something from when you were a kid. Just like putting it on, and you don't necessarily need to pay attention to every scene in the story, but it's fun to watch.
I mean, my favorite movie is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I'm trying to watch every scene. But I get what you're saying because
not that it's saying I'm not watching every scene, but
it's
like
just it so well that you don't have to.
Yeah, like
what's gonna happen.
I'm not like fully engulfed in everything that they're saying in the movie, or I'm not fully engulfed in every line that they're saying in this album, but I'm enjoying just the experience of listening to it.
Mm-hmm. I feel it, but those are my rap thoughts on the whole thing. So
that's our rap thoughts on Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique.
Paul's Boutique, which I was expecting flowers or something like that. It's like suits.
Thank you to all of our listeners. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube, Rap Thought Podcast, and you can check out some of our video clips on there. We also have full episodes on YouTube. Definitely hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're there all the time, 24/7. Hit us up.
We don't even sleep. We just wait.
We sit with our phones open.
Yeah.
All right. Peace.
Goodbye.